Okay, well, the trick now is going to be, let's go into our style sheet. I want to show you a little trick that you cannot do with the CSS panel here. You have to know how to type this in. So if I go down to find where it created my section, okay, where it says background, instead of saying FFF, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a property that is good for in CSS3. So it doesn't go backwards compatible to all browsers like the really old ones, but you'll be fine using this. So if we say rgba, rgba for red, green, blue, alpha, and then you put parentheses, I always close mine and go back inside, you're going to have 4 values. You're going to have red, green, blue, and alpha, and you're going to separate them by commas. So if you know that, let's say that white, pure white, you know that white is, if you were to look at your values like say in Photoshop or something, you would know that to create a white color on a display on a computer screen, you need the full level of brightness in red, green, and blue. So there are 256 levels from 0 to 255 of values in each channel, red, green, and blue channels. So you would need 255, comma, 255, comma, 255, comma, and then for the alpha transparency, we could say like, let's try 0.5 or something like that. Okay, so this is saying for the red channel, give me 255 for the value, for the green channel, 255, for the blue channel, 255. That gives us white, and then knock it back by 50% in its alpha transparency. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll test it. And then you see that it's really very faint. It's a little bit too faint. Alright, so you can play around with these values, but I know what I would want to set mine at. And that's going to be 0.7. I think 0.7 is about right. And now the other thing too that I had on the example is that I had a drop shadow on the sides. Well, okay, how do you do a drop shadow? If you want, again, I would recommend that you go to CSS tricks. Let's get rid of these, and then you can type in box shadow and you can find this tutorial, and it explains about how box shadows work. It also explains like what these value positions are. We've got first the horizontal offset, vertical offset, blur radius, the spread, and then the color. And here you can also use rgba. Alright, I'm going to go ahead, and it gives you some examples. I'm going to go ahead and show you though, like if you didn't want something that was offset to the side, like for instance if you wanted the entire page to be like this, then you don't want to offset it horizontally and vertically. You just want it to be straight, as if the light source is coming straight down on it at a 90-degree angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste this in and explain it to you. Okay, so we have vendor specific rules. So for Mozilla browsers, for basically Apple browsers and Chrome, and this is essentially for some other ones including Internet Explorer, we have these different offsets. We have horizontal, vertical, blur, and then the spread, and then the color, and I'm going to use rgba. And within rgba, I want it to be, instead of 255 before what we did here, which is white, if you want to create black doing RGB, then you have 0 value for red, 0 value for green, 0 value for blue. Basically, you have no light whatsoever coming through the monitor. And then I'm going to tell it to be at about a 15% opacity. Okay, let's save that and see how it looks. And you want to do the same for each one of these vendor-specific rules, okay? Let's save it, and let's take a peek. Okay, and that's starting to look a little bit more like the demonstration version, okay? So you might also be wondering, like, okay, well, how do I get this right off the edge? That margin's really tight and it's ugly. So we could apply the same principles to the articles that we did to like this whole section, where we give it a percentage and then we tell it that it's supposed to have auto left and right margins. Because if you look at the way that the source code is set up, the section contains all of these individual articles. Okay, so let's tab that in. And so the section is 80% of the viewport, because it's not inside of anything else except for the body, and the body is the viewport. So it'll be 80% of the body, and then it's got auto left and right margins. Well, then the articles, if we tell them to be a percentage of width, then that percentage is going to be percentage of its parent. That's the way percentages work in cascading effect. And so basically, if we say, let's say that the article is maybe 80 or 85%, it'll be 80% or 85% of the section's 80%. Okay, so let's just take a really quick sample or example of how to do that. So I'm going to highlight this. Actually, I'm going to click refresh here, and I'm going to I don't have to make a new rule. I can just go to the article rule, and I can tell it to be a width of, let's try 85% and see what happens. And then we want to do the margins so that we have 0 on the top and bottom. You could do your margins however you want on the top and bottom, it really doesn't matter. And then for the left and right, I'm going to say auto, like this, or I could say apply, and then OK. So if I save that and then I take a peek in Google or whatever you're using, Firefox, then now you see no matter how big I make it, it's always going to keep a certain margin distance away from its parent edge, and then the section is going to keep a certain distance away from its parent edge, and so forth. And so, like, even if you're looking at it on a tablet or a phone, or just somebody resizes it while they're sitting there on their computer and they want to, just get it out of the way and make it smaller, the content will still be there, and it'll still work, and everything will still be happy and right in the world of your website. Okay. Now, the other thing, if you look at the demo that I put in there, that you may want, you don't necessarily need it if you have a persistent navigation header up here, but at some point if you want to have like a little back to top or something like that, then what it does is it jumps all the way back up to the top area. So let's just say that you want something like that. I want you to notice something. It's not on link 1. You don't see it anywhere because the top is link 1. So if I had a button here that I clicked, it would just sit there and refresh this view. So that would be confusing. So I only include it in links 2, 3, and 4. But I want you to notice something about this particular thing, is that as I scale, the button gets bigger. Alright? And so one of the things about that that's useful is that it'll end up looking okay on larger browsers, like on larger browser screens, Windows and things like that. So I'm going to show you that it's not like that simple to do. So I'm going to show you a trick in how you can get that to work. Alright, so first things first, let's go ahead and add it. We have to add it to our section, or our articles, and you'll notice this is the first link 1, right? I already just said I don't want it inside of the first article. So I want it inside the second, third, and fourth articles. So to do that, after the header, I'm just going to go ahead. I don't know what other content would go here, really, but I'm just going to go over here in the code view, and I'm going to hit a couple of returns after the header tag ends. And then I'm going to go and I'll show you over here to the insert panel. If it's not already selected, make sure that the common insert panel is selected. And then you'll see an option for inserting an image. So if I click on that, then I can navigate to my image folder. Alright, and I'm going to choose my little button that says back to top. I'm going to click open. And then you need to give it alternative text. That's really important. It's for screen readers, for search engines, for people who can't see very well. They can have the screen read back to them, and it'll read the alternative text so they know what that button does. So we're going to say navigate back to top of page or something like that. And it can't be too long. This is a reasonable amount of text. So I say OK, and then it inserts the picture for me. Well, look, it's gigantic. This picture I made kind of as a big picture because just in case I ever want it to be really big. That's probably way bigger than I'd ever want it, but just in case, I can reuse it in different places, and I don't have to have too many different sizes. Anyway, so I inserted it, but one of the things I want you to notice that happened is that it automatically put the width and the height attributes inside of the image source tag. And also I want you to notice that this img tag, this image tag, it doesn't have a separate ending tag the way that, say, article has an ending article tag, and the way header has an ending header tag, and h1 has an ending h1 tag. Image is one of these ones that's self-closing. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I want to take the width and the height off, and the reason is because if I'm trying to style it in CSS, this width and height will screw everything up because it'll take precedence over the CSS. And Dreamweaver, this is something important to know, Dreamweaver, every time you use that insert tool that I just used, every single time it's going to put a width and height attribute, and it's going to automatically assign the image's native width and native height. I'm going to delete that. Make sure that when you delete it, there's only one space in between the alt attribute and this quotation mark for the image value. Alright, and you'll notice it doesn't change the size of the image just by removing that width and height attribute. And you might be wondering, asking, well, why didn't we just change the dimensions in that width and height attribute? Well, the reason I don't want to do that is because if we tell it to be that, whatever size we tell it to be in width and height inside of this tag, then it will always be that width and height, no matter how big our screen is or how small our screen is. It will always be the same size. And if we make it big enough that it's going to be the right size maybe on a large desktop browser, maybe it'll be too big on a phone. And so one of the things that we can do is we can tell it to be a specific percentage, but we can't just tell it. We can't just tell this image to be a percentage the way, say, that we did with our article tag and with our header tag. It doesn't, or not header tag, section tag. It doesn't really work that way with images. So the trick with images is that if you want to scale an image, you can set a percentage on it, but it has to have a specific relationship to its parent. Okay, so let's just say that we wanted this to always be a certain percentage of its parent. It would make sure that it would always be a certain percentage of the article. Okay, so that's the first thing to notice. So let's just do that as an example real quick. So if I were to go into the style sheet here and I were to tell it that I wanted an img tag, first of all, it would be every image, and we don't want every single image inside of the page to be a percentage. That's the first problem, because look, if we decide later to put other images in here, there's no other way to identify this because it doesn't have a special class or ID or anything like that. So the best way really to do this is if I highlight this whole image, I can do Command T or Control T. On a PC it'd be Control, on Mac it is Command, and I can wrap a tag around that says P, and I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to say class equals, and then in parentheses I'll say back, not parentheses, I'm sorry, quotation marks, I'll say back dash to dash top. Okay, and actually if you want to make these underscores you can. It's up to you. I'm making them hyphens. If you want to be consistent, see, like the name of the actual file is back underscore to underscore top, and then here I'm using hyphens. So if you want to be consistent, let's just do that. Let's make these underscores. So the class is back to top. Then it wraps a paragraph tag around the image here. Okay, it's just alright. So this whole thing, if you want it to be easier to read, you can do something like this. Okay, so that you can see that this paragraph, and then if you want you can highlight it and then tab it in so that it's in line with the header tag. It's easier to see.